Today I have the skin tones masterclass for you. I'm going to show you as much things as I can on skin tones. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. This video is sponsored by Artlist.io, but I'll tell you more about that later on in the video. By the way, I'm working here in a DaVinci YRGB color managed timeline, so that's why you will not see any color space transform nodes throughout this video. But all of these techniques, all of these adjustments, everything I'm showing you in this video can be used on a DaVinci YRGB color managed timeline or in a scene referred timeline where you use color space transform nodes in your node tree. You guys already know I like to get straight to the point, so let's go ahead and get started. So I've got this image here and we've got pretty much every skin tone represented on it. And what I want to do is take you through each range of these skin tones while we take a look at the waveform and at the vectorscope. So the first thing I want to look at is the luminance ranges of these skin tones. And I've got my waveform set up to show me the luminance channel, and I'm going to turn on the colorize for this. This is where you can expect to find any skin tone at any point when color grading in the context of primaries. Once you get into the look development section of your color grade, you can sort of abandon these rules or expectations. There's no one size fits all advice for that because your look development is a creative decision. You can make a tutorial on how to create a specific look, but you can't really give one piece of advice that works for all look development, right? So I can't tell you, okay, no matter what look you're creating, your skin tones need to be this. No, that doesn't apply because it's just too subjective. So here we got our lightest skin tones, right? And check out this range that they exist in. I wanted you to look at these ranges just so that you can know more or less where these skin tones sit on the waveform. You can use your skin tones as a reference for exposing your shot when you're setting your primaries. And if you're working with fair skin tones, this is more or less a good range to have them at. These peaks up here represent the specular highlights of the skin tones, the brightest areas of the skin tones, like forehead, sometimes the cheek, sometimes like the clavicle here, and that can sit for fair skin tones somewhere in between 70 and 80 IRE. Some of the darker areas, places like under the chin, maybe the sides of the face, they can sit somewhere between 40 to 50 IRE. Let's take a look at the next range of skin tones. Just to get rid of the hair, just so we can, get a more targeted view at just the skin tones. Now our luminance range is a little lower. And for skin tones that are just slightly darker, still pretty light skin tones, they can sit somewhere around here. The specular highlights, the brightest parts of the skin, can sit somewhere between 70 IRE and 80 IRE, probably closer to 70 IRE. And then the lower areas can have a floor of around 30 IRE and can range somewhere between 30 and 40 IRE. These skin tones here on the left are slightly lighter than these skin tones here on the right. And we can see just that gradual progression down the waveform. Again, I'm just showing you guys this so you get more familiar with these ranges. As we get darker here, I'm going to turn off the colorize so I can better see the waveform. Again, these skin tones here are a little lighter and then they're progressing to darker. This subject over here, the brightest parts of his skin is sitting at around 48, 50 IRE. And then the darkest parts, like, the chin, he does have a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow here, but these darker areas, they'll sit somewhere around 15 to 20 IRE. And as we get darker and darker, darker areas may range, again, somewhere between 15, 20 IRE, but then the brighter parts of these skin tones might sit below 40 IRE. And so it's good to see these differences because what happens a lot is someone may understand, oh, okay, I can use skin tones to set a good exposure, but then they get like a dark skin tone, let's say like this. They'll set a subject like this for their primaries. They'll set that range up here, and then they wonder, well, why is my shot overexposed? Or why does this look washed out? And that's because they've probably missed out on getting to know skin tones on this technical level. Here we have the darkest skin tones, right? And you can see just where they're sitting, right? And then I'll just refine it a little bit. That's fine there. So this subject over here, the absolute brightest part of the skin is sitting at 35 IRE, 34, somewhere around there. And the darkest part of his skin is down at around 10, even a little lower than that. And then, again, that just ranges. You can see this gradual darkening here and can sit, somewhere between 6, 7 IRE to up to like 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 IRE. Getting to know the skin tones on this technical level is really helpful, and it's a bit of a shortcut to getting more familiar with skin tones and better at adjusting skin tones. You can spend endless amounts of time just color grading skin tones and working on them, and building that intuitive knowledge, but that's gonna take a lot of time and a lot of practice. So now let's take a look at our skin tones through the vector scope. I'm gonna go over to the vector scope scale style. As you can see, these lines here, which represent the 6 main vectors, they sort of fade out, right? And then it fades up into 75% saturation. These dark areas here represent like a global average saturation. This is not like an exact average, but just more or less, right? So these darker areas sort of show you like where you want to be sitting in terms of saturation. And you can see that the skin tones here, the saturation for the skin tones, for every skin tone, doesn't go past that area, right? So it sits somewhere in between 75 and 0% saturation. And that is the absolute most saturated part of the skin tones, right? Because the saturation for, let's say, just one skin tone, let's grab a skin tone here, let's say, actually, I'll reset this. Let's just grab this skin tone, right? We'll just isolate here real quick. And we can see that it's a range, right? It's not just one amount of saturation. There's low saturation, which is typically the brightest parts of the skin tone, and also the darker parts of the skin tone. And then like the main body of the skin tone is probably the most saturated area. And that's what you can see here. It's not always one saturation value, it's a range, right? This is in terms of primary adjustments, in terms of setting a good foundation for then later on creating your look, right? If you're creating like a really bright, saturated commercial look, like you might find your skin tones a little, more saturated than this, right? It just depends on what type of story or what type of emotion you're trying to convey through your color. There's a link to this image in the description of this video if you're interested in downloading it and bringing it into DaVinci Resolve and taking a look at it for yourself. So the second thing I wanted to go over is node placement. And this is a common question with a lot of beginners. The way a basic workflow for color grading is set up is you'll have your primaries, you'll have your secondaries, you'll have your look section, then you'll have maybe your OFX section, right? And then if you're working in a scene referred timeline where you're taking care of your color management in your node tree, you may have a CST at the end, and then sometimes you may be working with a LUT and you'll have that after your CST node. This can vary, it's not always like this, but this structure represents a lot of color grading workflows, right? And then some colors may have a separate node for everything in their primaries. Just let each of these nodes represent whatever amount of individual nodes you may have for each of these sections in your color grade. So I place my skin tones node right after my primaries node. And there are two reasons why I do this. Number one is after your primaries node, assuming you've done a good job on setting your white balance, you have a signal here with a true skin tone going on. And that makes it very easy for you to get a good mask with your qualifier if you feel like you need to. Once you start adjusting secondaries being things like power windows or HSL adjustments, it can be easy for you to muddy up the signal. And, depending on your look, you definitely will lose your true skin tone here because that's when you start to introduce color casts or split toning and things like that, which are going to muddy up your skin tones. And so you won't be able to make a clean selection downstream. So if you keep your skin tones node here, you can avoid all of that. The second reason is a bonus tip that I'm going to share with you towards the end of the video. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the first topic, which is skin tones and white balance. Good white balance generally equals good skin tones. You can adjust the white balance of your shot using the skin tones as the reference point. And I'm going to show you how to do that with the temperature and tint controls, which are the most basic controls that you can use for white balance. So we're going to use this shot here to see how white balance and skin tones are related to each other. I've got here my primaries node, and what I'll do is bring down my exposure. Right, as I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the luminance ranges of skin tones, I've got here a very fair skin tone, and that's being represented on my waveform here. So I've got the brightest parts of her skin tone, and we can see that these being the brightest parts of the skin, right? Obviously we want to focus here on the face and on the shoulders. So the brightest parts of her skin are right here, this spot on her forehead. I can use that as a reference point for setting my exposure. And I know, again, like I showed you earlier in the video, for fair skin tones, the specular highlights can sit somewhere between 70 and 80 IRE. So I'm just gonna keep that somewhere around there. And I'll leave that, a little bit on the brighter side. So, you don't have to really be so conscious of everything, right? You can use one part of the skin tone, knowing, okay, for fair skin tones, the brightest part sits somewhere between 70 and 80 RE. Just use that as the anchor, and you can just trust that if you're using a macro adjustment, which you should when you're adjusting primaries, you can trust that everything else will just sort of fall into place. During your primary section, you don't want to get into breaking apart the image. You can also use your gain, gamma, lift wheels. These are pretty wide adjustments which do affect the entire image. But for example, the gain wheel affects mainly the highlights, the gamma wheel affects mainly the midtones, and the lift wheel affects mainly the shadows. But the lift wheel does affect a little bit of the highlights, vice versa, the gain wheel does affect a little bit of the shadows. So these also work for primaries, but if you can set a good foundation for your image with just the offset wheel, that's generally a good practice. And now if I come over here to my vectorscope, I'm going to turn on the indicator line again. I can see that my skin tones are very yellow, right? You might have looked at this and thought, oh, well, the skin tones look natural. But actually, they're a little too yellow. If we were creating a look, then, maybe we could say subjectively the skin tones are fine, right? If we wanted to create a warm look. But because we're creating primaries, and one of the purposes of adjusting your primaries is to get good color separation, we want to make sure that our skin tones are sitting a little closer to this line. So what we can do is come over to the temperature control because we can see, okay, our skin tones are a little too yellow. So let's bring it towards blue. We'll go too far and bring it back. And you can see already, just with that small adjustment, we can see this beautiful color separation, which separates the subject from the background. And once I've done that, I might adjust my tint. So there you go. We've adjusted the primaries of our shot, just focusing on a good exposure and good white balance, and our skin tones are taken care of because we use the skin tones as the anchor for adjusting those primaries. The skin tones serve as a neutral, floating around a specific hue, and in the digital world, that is this hue here. That's what this skin tone indicator line represents. The better your camera is, right, the more dynamic range your camera has, the better it can capture the little intricacies of the hues in the skin tones. If we go back to this image, we can see that we have some skin tones that are a little bit more red, and we have some skin tones that are a little bit more yellow. And actually, if we were to grab any of these skin tones, and let's grab a range here. Right? We can see that the skin tones aren't completely on that line, right? We have slightly reddish deviation and slightly yellowish deviation. So this skin tone indicator line serves as a sort of lighthouse to guide you, to let you know more or less where your skin tones should be. From there, depending on the look you're creating, you decide, okay, these skin tones should be a little bit more yellow, maybe a little bit more red. It also depends on what your client wants. I've had clients tell me, yeah, I want the skin tones to sit a little bit more on the golden side, basically be a little bit more yellowish. And I've had clients request that skin tones be a little bit more reddish. So I want to show you what would happen to this image if I tried to line up the skin tones exactly on this line, right? So I'll grab this temperature slider and I'll bring it down. And you can see that if I'm keeping to these macro adjustments, which affect the entire image, I can't really do that because the skin tones have this sort of diagonal range in relation to the skin tone indicator line. Considering this image that this is a daylight scene, I would leave this maybe a little bit leaning more towards the yellow side. When you're working with fair skin tones, they do generally tend to lean a little bit more towards yellow. As I mentioned a little earlier, one of the reasons and benefits for a good primaries adjustment is getting good color separation. This is important because if you want to use the HSL qualifier to grab a mask of the skin tones, you're gonna need that color separation to get as clean of a selection as possible. So just remember that when it comes to skin tones, good white balance equals good skin tones. And you can sort of shoot two birds with one stone. Some people think that, you set your white balance first and then you adjust your skin tones. No, you can take care of both of them with a good white balance adjustment. Now let's go over how to get a good selection of the skin tones using the HSL qualifier. And we're gonna do that with this shot here. If you're working with 8-bit footage, it's not recommended that you use the HSL qualifier. The HSL qualifier can very easily reveal artifacts that you have going on in your image. If you're working with 8-bit footage, that doesn't mean you can't adjust your skin tones, obviously. You just should not use a qualifier. Here's how I would go about making a clean selection of my skin tones. This image here already has a good white balance. We're just gonna assume that we did a good primaries adjustment. So we'll just have here our skin tones node. So I make a selection. If I select Shift H, that turns on this highlights control here. And this is what I generally do. I go down the HSL qualifier, and then I go to the matte finesse section, and then I go back to the HSL ranges if that matte finesse didn't do it for me. I'll select my skin tones, and then I'll come here to the hue, and I'll bring down the width until I remove basically everything that is not the skin tones. And I go as much as I can, and then I'll bring it back. And because I know what I'm gonna do here in the matte finesse, I'm comfortable leaving these little specks here. Something else I might do is affect the center and just try and make sure that I'm just selecting the skin tones, right? And I might find that in moving the center control here, I'm getting rid of things like hair or other things and selecting more of the skin tones. So generally in the hue range, I'm only working with the width and the center. Then I'll go to saturation and I'll go to the low and I'll bring that up. Generally, you can't bring it up too much without affecting the skin tones. And then I'll come here to the high and I'll bring it down. When it comes to skin tones, as you start to remove the more saturated parts, you'll find that the areas that start to get removed are like the inner parts of this ear here and things also like around the eyes. So just keep an eye on those parts so that you're not, getting rid of those sections. After that, I'll come over here to the luminance and I'll see how far, if I'm working with darker skin tones, I'll make sure that I'm, getting that range in as well. You might see these sections like the eyebrows and the eyes being lost. That's fine because I don't want to select those sections there. This section down here is like a little beard that the subject has going on. So I don't mind losing that at all. And again, these little specks here that are present in the skin tones, you'll see why I'm fine with them being there. And then I'll just grab this high and make sure that I've removed as much as possible. Be careful with the high control in the luminance range because it can be very easy to deselect the specular parts of the highlights and not see it, right? Like if I bring this down a little bit, you can see how the skin tone here in the bright parts starts to become gray. And it can be easy to mistake that as like, oh, that's just the bright part of the skin tones. But then when you go to make an adjustment, I'll just make this drastic effect here. You have these sections that you missed out on the mask, and that down the line can start to create some ugly artifacts. So just make sure that you're not missing them in the high slider of the luminance range. Also, if you want like a slightly different view, you can choose the black and white highlight button, and you'll be able to see a black and white selection of your mask. Some people may prefer this over the other view. So after I've gone down the hue, saturation, luminance ranges, I'll go over to the matte finesse, and this is generally what I'll do. I'll set the post filter to 0.1, and that applies just a very nice overall softening and cleanup of the mask. Then I'll come over here to my denoise and I'll set it to 1, anywhere from 1 to 3 or 5, depending on how far or how close the subject is to the camera. The closer the subject is to the camera, the more denoise I can add, and then the farther it is, the less denoise I can add, because the denoise is going to sort of take away some of the sharpness and some of the precision of the mask. And I don't want to do too much if the subject is far away, because the mask might become this blur, and whatever adjustments I'm creating to the skin tones, I might start to see it in areas around the skin tones. After that, I'll come up here to the clean white. And what this is doing is it's taking the selection you made here and it's just removing the little parts. Remember those little sections that were here present in the skin tone? Actually, I'll turn off the post filter and the denoise so you can see that a lot better. These little bits here, it basically cleans them up. And so I'll just bring up the clean white until those are gone. And then the clean black creates a similar effect, but in everything that you didn't choose. And I'll turn on these as well. And there you go. So 4 controls: post filter, denoise, clean white, and clean black. You can use the other ones. Do check out the DaVinci Resolve manual to read more on what these other controls do in the matte finesse section. You can get a really good clean selection with just these 4 controls. If I find that these 4 controls didn't do it for me, and in this case they did, I'll go back into the hue, saturation, luminance sliders and further refine that selection. So the HSL Qualifier is a great way to grab a selection of your skin tones, but you can also use the 3D qualifier. And let's go over how to use that real quickly when I reset the selection. In the 3D qualifier, you also have the same matte finesse tools that you do in the HSL qualifier. So you can apply the same workflow that I showed you earlier with the 3D qualifier as well. In the 3D qualifier, you have 4 modes that you can use, and they basically behave differently when you're selecting a certain tone. The soft mode provides a nice fall off, a nice soft edge, and this is the one I recommend. But you can also use the other ones if you feel you like the effect it gives you. This is flat. This is tight. Tight is a very strict selection. Whatever hue you select, it's only going to select that hue. It's not going to create a smooth selection. But if the conditions are right, you can use this to be very precise and then go in and finesse that selection. The Luma mode is the same as just using the luminance slider in the HSL qualifier. It's only going to target specific luminance ranges. For skin tones, I recommend soft, but experiment with the flat and tight modes to see if you like how they behave. So for the soft, you can just come in here and grab the range of the skin tones, and then use the post filter, denoise, clean white, and clean black adjustments like I showed you earlier to further clean that up. And these are the controls here that you can use to further refine the selection. This button here is the chroma tolerance. And if you click and you drag to the left or the right, it basically expands or contracts the range of the colors that you selected. This control here is the chroma softness. So if you click and drag it, you're changing the sensitivity to similar colors. And it also helps in a soft selection or a hard cutoff for that selection. So if you look here at this square, we can see that you basically have the color wheel. And so if we move up this way, we have red. If we move this way, we have yellow. If we move this way, we have green, cyan, blue, magenta. If you move this to the left and right, you're moving the selection this way, right? And I'll just show you. Okay. And then the Y control does the same thing, but it's moving up and down, right? Because this is the color wheel, and it's the same color wheel which the vectorscope represents. This is the warm section of the color wheel. If this is the center, right, we've got our skin tone selection right here to the top left, and that lines up well with what the vectorscope shows you. So this control here is the angle, and what it basically does is it sort of works like the hue, right? Where if you grab this hue and it rotates around like that, it's creating a similar movement, right? But it's not the hue that's pivoting around, it's the selection. If the skin tones, let's say, were a little bit more yellow deviated, then you can swing it to the left. If the skin tones were a little bit more red deviated and you wanted to select that, you can swing it to the right. This low control here expands or contracts the darker areas of the skin tones. This areas here is particularly because we have a subject here with dark skin tones. We can use that to bring those areas back. And then vice versa, this high control here does the same thing, but for the bright parts of the skin tones. The low soft and the high soft controls basically soften the selection of the skin tones. So these are the tools that are available for you to use with the 3D qualifier. You might find that it gives you a much better selection in some scenarios than the HSL qualifier. All of the techniques, all of the tips that I'm going to give you when adjusting skin tones in the rest of this video, you can combine with a qualifier if you need to be very precise. And then if you need to, or if you want to take that selection further, you can add a power window selection along with your qualifier selection if you need that precision. Now let's look at how to adjust the skin tones using the HSL curves. Using the HSL curves is one of the easiest and simplest ways of adjusting your skin tones. Mathematically, it is the smoothest. It can be pretty precise, but not always as precise as combining obviously with the qualifier. The 3 main curves that you would use are the hue versus hue, the hue versus sat, and the hue versus luminance curve. In the hue versus hue curve, you would adjust the hue of the skin tones. In the hue versus sat, you would adjust the saturation of the skin tones. And in the hue versus luminance curve, you would adjust the value or the brightness of the skin tones. We're gonna go through each one of these individually. If you don't see this histogram here in the background of your HSL curves, you can come up here to the menu, go to histograms, and turn on input. And then that'll show you the hues that are present in the HSL curves. And it'll help you to make more precise selections. Before I do that, let me adjust this image real quick. Here's a quick tip for you. If you have an image like this where, naturally the tones are a little muted and you're having a hard time sort of gauging the white balance, obviously your vectorscope is your best friend. It can guide you in making sure that things are balanced. But if you want to get a better gauge for it, you can boost the saturation. And then as you're adjusting your white balance, you'll have a better view of like, okay, oh, this is too magenta, this is too green. There you go. Let's say that's good. Okay, now I'll bring down my saturation to a level that I think is good for primaries. And that's good there. So now I'm going to make my skin tone adjustments, right? So if you're working with 8-bit footage, the HSL curves are how you generally want to go about adjusting the skin tones. In the hue versus hue curve, I can see all the hues that are now present in my image. And the HSL curves all come with these 6 vector presets. If you select them, they create anchors, which you can use to affect the 6 main hues. I just want to create an anchor for all of those hues. And I can create custom anchors by going anywhere on the curve and then just adding an anchor. But if I come down here, let's say I wanted to select these blues. If I just click, it's gonna bring down the entire image, and I don't wanna do that. So hold down Shift and go to the hue that's present, and it'll create an anchor without any hue rotation applied to it. So I just wanna set an anchor for all that. And now I've got an anchor for my skin tones, which I can use to adjust the hue of the skin tones, and I've protected all the other colors in the shot, so I won't be affecting them as I affect the skin tones. Not only that, I'm keeping everything flexible. You don't need to be so precise always, right? Of course you can be, but you don't need to be. So let's say these were my skin tones. If I come here and make my anchor for the skin tones, you know, if I go right away and make one selection here, and then let's say, you know, I brought in this anchor here. By the way, you can move the hue that the anchor is targeting here in the input hue control. And let's say I really wanted to target just the skin. You could do that, and obviously if you're working with 10-bit footage, you'll be able to get away with it. But if you're working with 8-bit footage, keeping these boundary anchors a little wide can help you to make the color change a lot smoother, and it might even give you a little bit more flexibility when adjusting the skin tones. And you can see that here. I'm just gonna move this really drastically to see, like, okay, I've really restricted the hues that I'm selecting here, and now I'm getting like these blotches, these areas where I am affecting, and all these other areas that I'm not affecting. But like, let's say I remove these boundaries, right? And I'll bring this back out to just protect that yellow. Now I'm affecting most of the skin tone. Try and keep it as open as you can. Okay, and that'll help you to make smoother selections. Something else I want to mention here is we can see this area here that's not being selected. What we can see is that this part of the skin tone is a little yellow. So what's happening here? Well, number one is that maybe our skin was a little too yellow. So then we can come in here and either cool it down or bring it towards magenta, right? Because on the color wheel, obviously the opposite of yellow is blue, so that takes it away from yellow, but magenta also pushes you away from yellow. So as you're going through your image, little things like this might point out to you like, hey, you need to go back, right, and fix this. You know, maybe it works, right? Maybe the subject is somewhere where there's some yellow being reflected into her skin, and like, okay, it's just natural then. I think that's the case here. You know, the skin tone just has a little bit of these like greenish parts because you have all this green being reflected on your skin. And so that's fine. But I just wanted to mention that real quick. So that's it in terms of making a good selection. For this image, I don't feel I need to adjust the saturation or the luminance, but if you wanted to, you could use these curves exactly for that. And you can come in here and adjust the saturation. You can lower it all the way, and you can bring it up as well. In a scenario like this where the subject, or in this case skin tones, doesn't have like a similar color around it, for example, like here she has this neutral like stone wall, it can be easy to, you know, make the selection a lot more wide. On a shot like this where the background is like skin tone as well, this tool might be a little hard to use. So that's the easiest and simplest way to adjust the skin tones, is by using the HSL curves. A couple tips I want to give you: the hue versus luminance curve can be very easily start to create some ugly artifacts. So if I bring down the skin, in this case here, you know, I'm working with a red shot, so it's not doing, you know, it's bringing down the value of my skin tones kind of nicely, but look at what's happening here to these flowers, right? I'm bringing down the luminance, and it's sort of making them a little ugly. So just be careful. In some shots, this hue versus luminance curve doesn't tend to work as nicely as the hue versus sat curve and the hue versus hue curve. So just keep that in mind. What I prefer to do in this case is, if I'm combining the HSL curves with the qualifier, you can come over here to the saturation versus saturation curve or the saturation versus luminance curve, and you can add density. What this curve basically does is it takes the most saturated parts of whatever you're affecting. You know, in this case here, let me turn this off, right? If I just use this curve, I'm bringing down the value or the brightness of the most saturated parts of the image. So if I'm combining, the HSL curves with qualifier adjustment, let's just make a quick selection here. Let's get rid of these greens and the lips a little bit. Let's just keep it very simple. I'm adjusting the luminance, and it's a little bit less intense than the hue versus luminance, because here you're just taking everything that is that hue, you're just bringing it down. Whereas if you come in here, you're only going to bring down the most saturated parts of the skin tone. It's going to be a great way. Sometimes you get these hot spots of saturation here, like in the ear, or some parts of the skin, like sometimes you have reddish blotches on the skin. This is one way that you can clean them up. So just a couple tips for you there. Now let's take a look at how to affect the skin tones with the new color slice tool inside of DaVinci Resolve. The color slice tool is great because DaVinci Resolve has created a section for skin tones already. So you don't have to worry about making a selection. If you're working with 8-bit footage and you can't use the qualifier, you can come in here to the color slice tool and use the skin tone section. I would say this is the most efficient way to adjust skin tones because you have this section that's set up for you. So I'm just gonna quickly explain the controls here. In that, you'll just understand how to use this to adjust the skin tone. So this button here is the highlight preview button. And if you click and hold it, it'll show you the selection of the skin tones. If you want to hold that highlight view and see that selection while you adjust the selection here in the center control, you can hold down Shift H, and now you can come into the center control and make adjustments to that selection. If in your primaries you did a good job with white balance, then you'll find that the selection that the skin slice is making automatically will be much better. And if the selection is off, say for example, like the white balance of the shot is pretty fair, but let's say there was like a yellowish, maybe, I don't know, let's say it was too cool or something like that. And you come in here to the color slice tool. When you go to grab your selection or preview it, you'll see like, oh, a lot of my skin tone is not selected. Use that as an indicator that your white balance is probably a little off. Here in the hue control is where you adjust the actual color of the skin tone. And we can see that I'm also affecting other hues in the shot that are similar to skin tones. You can combine the color slice tool with a qualifier or with a power window to be more specific about the skin tone so that you're not affecting other parts of the image. Down here we have two sliders. This slider here on the left controls the density, and this slider here on the right controls the saturation. If we grab this density control and we bring it up, we can see that we're making the skin tones darker, or we're adding density to the skin tones. And if we bring it down, we're removing density and we're actually adding a little bit of saturation to the skin tones. If you're creating commercial looks and you want to give a quick pop to your skin tones, this is a quick way to do it. The density control is not only affecting the value of the skin tones, but it's adjusting the luminance of the more saturated colors. So it's not just taking the skin tone's hue and bringing it down. First, it's taking the most saturated parts of the skin tone and then bringing it down. After you've brought down the density slider for that, it's brightening up the skin tones, so it's increasing the luminance, but it is increasing the saturation a little bit. So you can just mitigate that by coming here to the saturation slider and bringing it down. And then the saturation slider is nice because it's also working in a more intuitive way and a more aesthetically pleasing way. It's saturating your skin tones without them becoming unnaturally bright. So a good example of that is, I'll come in here and just make a quick selection of my skin. Just keep it very simple. If I come in here to the primaries palette and I grab my saturation and I bring that up, you can see how it gets a little brighter. It's very digital, right? You can tell this is unnatural. But if I do that in the skin slice here and I bring it up, it's not as bright, right? It keeps that density. Yes, this is way too oversaturated. The skin tones did not get that much brighter. And that's how you can use the skin slice inside of the color slice tool in DaVinci Resolve to adjust your skin tones. Any of these techniques that I'm showing you, all of these approaches, whether you're using the HSL curves, whether you're using the color slice tool, you decide which tool you want to use. When you're at a part in your color grade where you want to adjust the skin tones, you can use any of these tools to go about it. I'm excited to show you this next way to approach your skin tones. It's great for commercial looks where sometimes clients ask you for a really consistent, pure skin tone, and it's a great technique to know. And that is how to use the color compressor with your skin tones. So I have this shot here, which I'll be using for this technique. And let's go ahead and set up our node tree real quick. In the skin tones node, I'm gonna create my selection. This is a technique that you have to combine with the qualifier. So here in the skin tones node, I'm gonna grab my selection. In this node here, the compressor node is where I'm gonna add my color compressor. And then we'll get to this later. I'm gonna go into my primaries, just make some basic adjustments. I'm just gonna focus here on the skin tones. So I'll come in here, bring it down. I'm gonna bring my saturation up. I'm gonna zoom out here, bring my saturation up, and bring it back. And I find that my skin tones are looking good. If you're in the middle of your primaries, using the display qualifier focus, having that turned on can really help you to gauge the white balance as well. Use anchor spots like the forehead, the cheek, parts of the cheek, right? Because sometimes subjects like females may have blush, and that may confuse you. You might put the qualifier over the blush and think, oh no, my skin tones are too red. And then you'll go to compensate that, and then you're just way off. Right, so use sort of more neutral areas of the skin, like the forehead, to help you gauge whether or not you're balanced. As you move through the skin tones, you'll find that the display qualifier focus is sort of dancing around. Let me zoom in here so you can really see the circle. As long as that skin tone indicator line is splitting that circle in half, right? It's going down the middle. Basically, it means that your skin tone is on average on that line, which means you're balanced. In this case, I feel like it's dancing a little bit more towards the reddish magenta side. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more green. And I'm liking that there, okay? I might increase my contrast control right under the hood of the Resolve Color Managed timeline. My timeline color space is set to DaVinci wide gamut, and middle gray for DaVinci wide gamut is 0.336 here in the pivot. So I want, for primaries, my contrast to pivot around middle gray. So I'm gonna set that and just boost my contrast a little bit. And that's creating some very nice separation here in our subject between her hair and the skin tone. And that's gonna come in handy when we go to make our selection. And that's good there. So there you go. Now I've got a balanced image and I'm ready to make my selection. So I'm going to come over here into the HSL qualifier and I'm going to grab my skin tones. I'm going to hit Shift H to see my selection. And using the same flow I showed you earlier, we're going to come into the width, bring it down all the way. Because the lips are redder than the rest of the face, if you got a good white balance on, you should find that the lips are removed first. But if you are grabbing this width and bringing it down and removing, and you start to see that parts of the face start to get removed along with the lips, then come over here to the center and move around until the lips are still being removed, but the skin is no longer being removed, or much less so to a greater or lesser degree. We can leave that there for now. We can always finesse this some more. Then I'll come down here to the saturation. Then I'll come over to the luminance. Okay, now that I've done that, I've set like a good foundation for my selection. I'll come in here. I'll set the post filter to 0.1. I'll increase my denoise, put it around 3. Then I'll grab my clean white and I'll clean up my selection. Then I'll grab my clean black and really bring that up. I'm trying to get rid of the lips here. I don't want this compressor effect to affect the lips. This is a good instance where you might find, man, I'm really spending so much time here trying to get rid of this red. 2 things you can do. Number 1, again, go back to your white balance to see if maybe I can remove some red here or some magenta. Maybe that's the cause of being unable to get that clean selection, is because your color separation is off. Another way to say your color separation is off is to say your white balance is off. So go back to the skin, and if we maybe try and finesse that a little bit more, you know, we can see, okay, I can choose a little bit more of the red without affecting too much of the skin. But if you're having to work it too much, you might try a different tool. And then come over here to the picker add tool, and then you'll be able to add to that selection. So we'll go down the cheek, and there you go. Now you can see that we've got the skin tones and we're not affecting the lips, right? So that's a good example where the HSL tool works fine, but there might be another tool that works better for a specific shot. From here, I might just go into my clean black a little bit, and then I might want to move away from yellow a bit. And there you go. We've got a good selection. What I might also do here, because this scene is sort of calling for it, is I would add a power windows around her face. I'm gonna keep this just very simple. Let's pretend that this is nice and tracked. So now I've got my skin tone selected, and let me show you how this compressor works now. So I'm gonna open my effects panel here. What the color compressor does is after you set a target color, and in this case here, I'm gonna select this preset that I have here. By default, I think you might find yourself here in the RGB sliders or the grayscale sliders. Come up here to this menu and select HSB sliders. And then in the context of skin tones, the hue that you want to set it at is going to be somewhere between 18 degrees or 25 degrees. And then once you've selected that hue, you can click here and drag and save that as a preset so that in the future, you're not having to set those values every time. So I'll hit OK. And then now let me show you what's happening. If I grab this compress hue, and I bring it all the way, it takes all the hues and it compresses them into that one hue. If I go back to the target color and I affect the hue, right? If I were to move this to yellow, it would take everything and compress it towards yellow. If I were to take everything and compress it towards cyan, it would do that to the entire image. What you could do is compress all the way and then come in here to the hue. You know, you can really be more specific, right? You can line this up in the middle and say, I want my skin tones to be right on that line, right? And or you can go, okay, I want my skin tones to be slightly red. I want my skin tones to be slightly yellow, right? You make that decision based on what your project needs. For this case here, I'll just set it to somewhere like in the middle, maybe slightly a little bit yellow, right? Up here in the more saturated parts. And that's, in this case here, 20 degrees. So I'll hit OK. And obviously, if you set compress hue all the way, you're compressing everything. I'm going to reset this. The reason I was affecting the entire shot is because I haven't linked up my mask to this. So what you want to do is grab the selection from the skin tones node and bring it in here. I like this 2-node setup. You can use the color compressor in this same node where you made the selection. That's just going to be up to you what you want to do. So now that I've got this mask here in this color compressor, I'm going to grab the compress hue control. I'm going to bring it in. And if you look at the vectorscope, you can start to see what's going on, right? I'm up all the way. Now my skin tones are just living on that line, right? And depending on that shot, it may look good, it may not look good. Here it is before and after, right? And you can see it's just affecting the hue. So we have down here like these slightly yellowish parts, and now they're no longer yellow. They are that true skin color. What I do recommend is setting this somewhere around 0.5, 0.6, and that'll bring in the skin tones a lot, right? If I hit Shift H, that'll bring in the skin tones a lot. Here are the skin tones without this effect, right? Go somewhere over here with some bright spots. Here are all the skin tones. If I bring this up all the way, it's gonna be really strict. And again, this may or may not look good depending on the shot. I think somewhere in the middle is a good place to start. And then you decide from there, like, okay, it's too much or that's good enough. But look at that effect, like just nice, even skin tones. And then from there, if you wanted to, you know, affect saturation, smooth out saturation, then you can go in and combine different techniques like that saturation versus saturation curve that I showed you earlier, where you grab the most saturated parts and you bring them down. And then that can help to, you know, take care of those problem spots. And now look at this nice skin tone that we've got going on. No more of those yellow blotchy parts. It's looking very nice. So that's a pro technique. If you're looking for that effect, this is how you do it. If you have a client that is really, you know, big on skin tones and the skin tones need to be perfect, this is the technique that you want to use. Now let's go over skin tones in the context of look development. I want to share with you guys some tips that you can keep in mind when you're in the look development section of your grade and you're having to keep in mind what's going on with your skin tones. And we're going to use this shot for that. And we're also going to use my K83 Power Grade. You do not need the Power Grade for this. All these techniques, everything I'm going to mention in this section, you can use with any other Power Grade or any node structure that you have going on as part of your look development. So I've got my Power Grade applied. I haven't done anything. It's just applying a nice Kodak 2383 color aesthetic. And I find actually that this shot is has a pretty good white balance going on. I might just affect primaries a little bit. I'm going to bring in some saturation, just a tiny bit. And I might make this look a little bit, I might introduce some green here. Yeah, that's good there. So my K83 Power Grade does have a look lab node, which is set up as a great workflow for your look development. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that, and then I'm just going to create new look nodes, which I'll use to explain to you the techniques that we're using. So in the context of look development, your skin tones can make or break your look. You may hear in the color grading world, you know, if your blacks are not black or your whites are not white, your look is going to look terrible. A lot of the times it's the case, but not always. There are many pro colorists who have just a little bit of color in the blacks and it looks very beautiful. And this is a creative decision that very beautifully breaks outside of the boundaries of these sort of standardizations that people have in their minds. And the skin tones can be thought of the same way. When you're working on primaries, there's good practice to follow. But once you're in the look development section of your grade, you can break outside of those limits. We went over luminance ranges of skin tones. You know, your Caucasian skin tones don't have to be up here between 50 and 80 IRE. They can be a little darker, right? Maybe the scene calls for it. Maybe the mood of the story, what you're trying to express creatively calls for it. The first thing I want to talk about is split toning. And here's a good basic way that you want to go about creating good split tone, which protects your skin tones. And so we are going to go into our curves palette here. And what you want to do is, once you've established your primaries, right, you have a good balanced skin tone. You know, if you're working with LUTs, you want to make sure you apply that LUT. Ideally, you're buying good quality LUTs. A characteristic of a good quality LUT is that they protect your skin tones or they keep them pretty neutral. And so I am working here in my K83 Power Grade. There's a Kodak LUT in here. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna select one of the main parts of the skin, which is right here on the forehead. And that's gonna create an anchor around which we're gonna create our split toning. So now, let's say whatever look I wanted to create, let's say I go into blue, and I wanted to add yellow to the highlights to create a more warmer scene, I can do that. And what that's going to do is it's going to add that yellow into the scene, but it's going to protect my skin tones. But let's say, you know, we did something a little crazier. I don't know. Let's add some yellow, some cyan. Let's say we take this off. You know, the skin tones, you know, might not look so good, right? We want to add this cyan to the shot, but we want to keep that color, that liveliness in the skin tones. Have that split tone pivot around the skin, and that'll allow you to add, you know, whatever color you want to add while keeping the look believable and natural. So like, let's say we wanted to do some crazier stuff, add some blue here, you know, maybe we'll come into the red and we'll add that cyan. Now let's add a little bit of red to the highlights, right? If I take this all away, we can see like what we're affecting. And you can also do that to better see your selection, right? If we bring this down all the way, and likewise, we'll bring this up here, we can see, okay, this is what's going on with the split tone. This is the range, right? Because we made the selection here, we're adding whatever, you know, this anchor here basically represents this line here, this terminator line. In the art world, this is called a terminator line. Basically, it's where the highlights and the shadows turn into each other. That's basically like where we're creating the split tone, right? If you wanted to, you can come down here to the curve, hold down Option, and slide this down or up to affect where that terminator line is. Keep in mind here, we're focused on the skin tones, right? We're sort of allowing the intelligence of color, the math of everything to just sort of land wherever it lands, but we're focused here on the skin tones, right? For example, if I did this, let's say for some reason, I'm creating the split tone based on something in the background, like I've completely left my skin tones, right? And this look might not be taking care of the skin tones. In this case here, it's not too bad because the colors we're adding, you know, stay close to a skin tone. But you want to, as you're creating the split tone, keep them based around the subject. We want this look, this color separation to pivot around the skin. And that's what we were doing here by setting the anchor here, which is perfect. I want the shadows of the skin to have this cyan or this blue or whatever color it is that you're introducing there. And I want these highlights to have this warm tones or whatever it is you're introducing there. And if I hit before and after, you can see like we're adding this nice color. What do we got going on here? This blue, right? You know, we got this yellow. And we've got this nice triadic color scheme going on now. There's another way for you to do that, and that is by using the HDR wheels. So let's come over to the HDR wheels. We're gonna come over here to the zone graphs view of this palette, and then we're gonna turn off black, dark, we're gonna turn off highlight and specular, and we're just gonna be left with light and shadow. So let's go back to the wheels view. Here on the left, this slider allows you to target the range that this color wheel is affecting. So I'm gonna hit Shift H, then I'm gonna select the slider, and then now I can see everything that I'm affecting, yeah? These areas here where you can see the image clearly, this is like the area that it's affecting. And then this area here, it's like the fade, yeah? It starts to fade out into the areas that it's not affecting, which is all the areas in gray. So if you remember what I mentioned about the terminator line, and I want to use this edge as that terminator line and define like, okay, here's where my color is going to be applied. And then now I'm going to come over here to the light and make that same adjustment and go, okay, here's where my color in the highlights, this is where it's going to be applied. Yeah? Let's go there. And then I'm going to hit Shift H. And now let's apply a very simple split tone. Let's do some yellow here in the highlights. And then we'll do some greenish cyan. Actually, let's do some blue. Perfect. So I'm adding blue in the shadows, I'm adding yellow in the highlights, and then here in the middle, right, in that terminator line, I'm protecting the skin tones. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of skin tone in the skin to sell that look. You know, maybe we went a little crazier here, right? Maybe we did, you know, some more cyan. Maybe we really pushed the skin tone a little bit more, yeah? But it works. That's because we have here in the skin, even if it's just a little, right? And this will just depend on the scene, on the lighting conditions, on the color palette. Sometimes it's enough to have just a little bit of true skin tone present in the skin to sell the look, right? And obviously we're here, we're in the lab, we're creating the look. You know, we know, oh, we're adding this color, but to someone else, they won't see it. They'll just see the beautiful color of this image and it'll look natural to them. But for us, we're the ones creating this look. It can be a little harder to see like, oh, this looks actually natural because I have a little bit of skin tone in here, right? And if I move my qualifier over, right, you can see down here in the vectorscope, we have some true skin tone here. And in this case, it's that terminator line that we're using as a pivot that we're setting with these sliders here. So keep that in mind. Allow yourself to be creative, but remember, if I just bring back in a little bit of skin tone into this look, I can sell it. How much so just depends on the look you're going for. Another technique when it comes to skin tones and look development is to, particularly when you're doing like a single color cast adjustment, for example, if you want to create like a simple cyan look, right? This doesn't look so bad because the skin tones are sort of close to the line. But let's say you wanted to make the skin tones look a little bit more natural. Instead of going to your skin adjustment nodes or whatever, your color decision can be a little bit more influenced by your desire to protect your skin tones. And you can line up that adjustment so that you are actually protecting your skin tones while adding that color. Creating the cyan look is one of the easy ways to do that. We'll do that here again in the gain. We'll just add a bunch of cyan, right? Let's just say this is the look that the client wants. And you go, okay, well, I know that if I have a true skin tone and I add cyan, that because I'm going directly towards cyan, I know that my skin tone will become slightly yellow and then desaturated. To add cyan to red is like to desaturate red. And because skin tone is close to red, it's like you're sort of doing the same. But because skin tone isn't diametrically opposed to cyan, it's slightly deviated to the left. So what's gonna happen is it's gonna become yellow. And you can mitigate that by bringing your skin tones over to magenta by grabbing the green channel and bringing that over. And now you've got that look, a nice cyan blue look, right? And maybe you can even, you don't have to go all the way. You can keep it a little bit in that yellowish section. But now you've got that cyan look, a nice cyan color cast, but your skin tones are looking good. They're looking natural. And it's better selling that cool cyan look. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing like single color cast adjustments, let's say you're making everything blue, what's going to happen to the skin tones? Because skin tones are like an orange. If you add blue, they become slightly red or slightly magenta. So what can you do there? You can add some green. And now again, you've got a cool look, but your skin tones are looking a little bit more natural. And with cool looks, in the context of skin tones, your skin can be a little bit on the right, and the skin tones will look natural. And that's just color relativity, right? The entire image is mostly leaning towards cool tones. So colors that are warm, they look warmer than they actually are. You can get away with a shot like this, a look like this, the skin tones being deviated slightly towards red, and it'll look natural. As colorists, you're constantly working with different types of footage and lighting conditions and different skin tones because you're being hired to work on projects. But as a beginner, if you're just starting out as a colorist, or you just don't have footage at the moment, you don't have clients, and you don't have a way to shoot your own stuff, like, it can be hard to develop your skills. And that's where a site like Artlist really comes in handy, because with Artlist, you have access to a giant library of both cinematic and commercial quality footage that you also have access to in its raw and log format. For me, Artlist is an invaluable tool as a colorist that you need to have. If you want to keep getting better as a colorist, you need to practice color grading. All the techniques that you learn through YouTube tutorials, through online courses, through all that, they're irrelevant if you're not putting them to practice and building that intuition and that eye for color grading. Not only is Artlist a giant library of high quality cinematic stock footage, but you also get things like high quality music and sound effects. You have visual templates. Artlist even has DaVinci Resolve plugins, and you have an awesome AI voiceover feature, which makes creating professional videos and content easier than ever. So if you want to put yourself on a fast track to step up your color grading and really improve your skin tone techniques, you can get started with 2 months for free when you sign up through the link in the description. The last thing I want to talk to you about before I get into the bonus section of this mini masterclass is skin tone textures. I'm going to show you one quick way that you can go about cleaning up skin tone texture and adding like a nice softer glow. And then I'm also going to show you how to create a nice dodge and burn effect for the skin tones, which is great for things like music videos and commercial color grades. And I'm also going to show you a way to adjust the skin tone, which is more targeted, but not as complex as the face refinement tool. The face refinement tool in DaVinci Resolve deserves its own masterclass, so I'm not going to cover that in this masterclass. So let's get into it. So I've got this shot here, and this is what we're going to use to go over skin texture. So first up, I'm going to fix up my primaries. I'm going to come in here, boost my exposure. I'll put the highlights over skin at around 65. I'm going to add some contrast as part of my primaries. And then now, again, we have a Caucasian skin tone here, so more or less, I'll keep her skin at around 75. Something else I'll do is I'll use the offset wheel to bring down the overall white balance a bit and help create some color separation. So now we've got a before and after, and we're ready to get to it. When you're adjusting skin tone texture, you will need to use a qualifier. So there's my primaries node. Here I'm going to do my skin tone selection, and here I will affect my texture. And I'll show you the different techniques here in this texture node. So for my skin, I'm going to come in here and make my selection. Bring down width all the way. And then I'm going to go to my low, bring it down. I'm going to grab my high, bring it down as much as I can. Then I'm going to grab my luminance, then my high. And then now I'll do my matte finesse settings again. I'll do 3 here. Then I'm going to clean up my white selection, and then my black selection here. That's good there. So now I've got my skin selection here, and I'll put this to my texture node. One of the quickest, easiest ways to take care of your texture is to come in here to the primaries palette or the HDR color wheels and adjust the midtone detail. And just take that out a little bit, and if I hit before and after, it's very subtle, and that's exactly what we want, but it starts to even out the midtones of the skin, right? Obviously, if you go too much, it can be way too strong. So generally, I find anywhere between 10 and 30 is good It just depends. If the subject is farther away, you'll need to be much more conservative with this. You don't want to do too much. And if the subject is very close to the shot, then you can get away with adding more of this. I'll just keep that there. And we can just see, if I zoom in here, that just helps to even out. It takes the midtones of the skin tone and it blends them into the highlights and into the shadows. And that creates just a nice smooth texture. Something else that you could do with that is further adjust the mask, right? And you can say, okay, I only want this smooth effect to be applied to, the shadows. So you can come in here and make this a lot smoother, maybe like a 3. And then only apply that softening to like the dark parts of the skin, right? Maybe you want to save the bright parts for whatever reason. So you could do that with your mask as well. And that's the quick way to adjust the skin texture. I want to show you how to use one of the plugins inside of Resolve, and that is the soften and sharpen effect. So I'm going to click and drag that into the texture node, and you would adjust these 3 sliders in this order. This is the technique for adjusting skin tones with this effect. You would keep the small texture at 0. Sometimes you might find reducing it to be desirable, but I'll get into that a little bit later. From there, you would want to lower the middle texture until it's too much and then bring it back. And then from there, you adjust the large texture to a value that is between the value of the small texture and the value of the middle texture. If you find that adjusting the large amount makes the face look plastic, then go back to the middle texture and adjust, and then try again with the large texture. After you've adjusted the large and medium texture, then you can go back to the small texture slider and bring back some natural details of the skin by increasing it just a tiny bit. Because if you do too much, you're gonna get very sharp, ugly artifacts in the skin. So let's do that here. Just after applying, we already have some of that effect. And you can see that, this is a little bit too much. For this shot, this is a little bit too much. Much of the time, I find that just applying this like that is, and then just affecting the opacity of this effect here in the key output or the global blend slider, it works pretty well for many shots. But in the context of this shot, it's not working too well, and that's great because I want to show you how to approach it. So what I would do is reset these, right? And now, this effect is not being applied. And so let's go with the technique that I mentioned. We're gonna grab our medium texture, and we're gonna bring it down until it looks too much, right? So like this would be too much. Just grab the middle texture and go all the way, and then bring it back until you're somewhere natural. And then once you're happy with that, again, remember, you want to keep the large texture in between the value of the small texture and the value of the middle texture. So we'll just go all the way there till it's too much. And just bring it back. I'll zoom out again. And I'm liking that right there. That's looking pretty good. And then from there, if you wanted to bring back some of the natural texture of the skin, you can come in here to the small texture. Right? Typically, I find that going past 0.3 is way too much. So just be very subtle with it, and that'll keep things nice and natural. Obviously, if you're doing something like a music video, you can push things a little bit more. So just allow yourself to, to be a little bit more liberal with the medium and texture sliders. But there you go. This is a very straightforward way because you've only got 3 sliders. With a tool like this, you have a very simple workflow for taking care of skin texture if your client requests it. Once you're working with a texture node as part of your color grade, let's say we have another shot from this scene where the subject is farther away, and you go to copy and paste this texture in there, you're going to have to readjust these texture sliders because this will be too much for subjects that are far away, and you're going to get some really ugly blotchiness. Likewise, if the subject was closer, you would have to maybe bump this up a little bit more. Just keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to reset this, and then I'm going to show you a cool way to create a dodge and burn effect for your skin tones, and that is using the glow effects in Resolve. And if you're working with the free version of Resolve, you have access to this plugin as well. So we'll bring this in, and then we're gonna grab the shine threshold and bring it all the way down. And you can see that, because we've got this mask going on, we're only affecting the skin tones. We're gonna change this composite mode to soft light. And then up here in the alpha masks light sources, we're going to turn that off. And then in alpha limits effect, we're gonna turn that on. And now the glow is only affecting the skin tones, and it's giving us the effect that we would like. So we're going to take down the opacity, and then we're going to boost this up. And we'll leave it there for now. I want to show you a couple more things. If we go over to the select output and we select glow alone, oh, actually, I'll turn on this as well. Here we can see the glow that's being applied. This light is being applied over the skin tones and it's creating that pop, right? If we take the spread and bring it down, that glow becomes more precise, right? And it starts to consider the roundness of the face and any contours that are being created. Bringing down the spread can help to create a more dodge and burn effect, right? So if I turn this back off, right now the skin, right, you can see like the brighter parts are being boosted and the darker parts are not being boosted so much, right? And it helps to create that nice contrast that you get with the dodge and burn effect. With these settings, the spread control turns into like a contrast control. As you decrease it, you get more definition. As you increase it, you get more of a rounded overall general brightening of the skin. One other thing that you can do is lower the saturation. If you don't want this dodge and burn effect to affect the colors of your skin, turn this down all the way. That'll just be up to you. What you can also do is take the selection a little bit further, right? And actually, you can fade in. We'll soften up this lower end a little bit, and then you can remove some of the darker areas. And then you can, clean up the selection as well. You can fade it more. And then now you're creating more contrast because you're not affecting the dark areas, right? If we zoom out, see that nice glow that the skin gets? This is a nice effect for things like music videos and commercial grades. All right, so I have one more thing that I want to show you. I've got my power grade applied real quick. There's just like a very easy standard look going on. Whoever shot this did a good job of exposing and doing the white balance, so we don't have much of a adjustment to make. I also want to keep things very simple for you. So let's say here in your skins node, right? And my power grade follows a similar workflow where right after the primaries, we have our skin tones node. And actually there's a compound node built into my power grade, which comes with different nodes for your skin tones. I just removed that and just added this to make things simpler. So here's where I will have my skin tone selection, right? Let's call that final. Yeah, let's just say that's it, just for the sake of time. Because here in the signal flow upstream, we have our true skin tones, we're able to get a clean mask of those skin tones. Downstream, we've added, let's increase the saturation of that. Let's go a little crazy here, yeah? Now we've got, this nice look for a music video, right? If you like this look, this is the tetrachrome look inside of my power grade. Let's say for some reason, the client, you or your client or someone goes, okay, I'm kind of not feeling this green. I love everything else, but I just want the skin tones to be clean. This is what you can do. You can set up what I call a post-look skin node. I always label it this. You can call it whatever else, but it's like a node after all of your look development. And in this case, in the context of my K83 Power Grade, the Look Lab, the Film Lab, and the Film Print node, if you're not using my Power Grade, whatever amount of nodes you're using for part of your look development, you can have this node after all those look development nodes. And I'm gonna call it Post Skin. And this is what this node does for you. It gives you access to your skin tones post look development. And so here's how you set it up. In whatever node you selected the skin tones, come over here to the alpha output and drag it into the alpha input of the post skin node. And now you have that clean, beautiful selection of just your skin tones, right? But again, for the sake of time, we're pretending this skin mask is perfect. Now you have those skin tones isolated after all your look adjustments, which is virtually impossible to get once you've added split toning, once you added a color cast, texture, things like that. Now you have access to that and you can do things like go into the HSL Curves, go into the color slice tool, add a compressor, whatever global adjustments you need to apply to your skin tones, you can do that in this post skin tones node here. And a good example of that is, let's say, we wanted to use our compressor technique, right? The client or you or whoever likes this look, but they go, okay, I'm not feeling these green highlights here in the skin. I love the green highlights everywhere else, just not in the skin for whatever reason, right? Or maybe they want you to tone it down. So you come in here, right? You set up your compressor just like we did before. You bring in that skin tone color and boom, right? And you've done all that without going back here to your skin tones node and affecting your skin tones, which might then affect everything else that you've done in your look development, in your secondaries, all that stuff. And then if in your look lab node or in your look development section, you have things like qualifiers, you're gonna affect everything in there, and that can make everything fall apart. So that's why this node here is a good tool to use. And that's just with the simple use of this alpha output and input. Let me know if you have any questions on any of the things we covered. I've got more videos like this for you in the future. I have also officially started to develop my own masterclass. If you're interested in that, you can just subscribe to this channel and I'll be posting more on that in the future. As always, thank you guys for watching.